evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Sean Hannity was named a client of Michael Cohen, the president's lawyer, in some afternoon courtroom drama. We'll give you the details of what exactly happened, and then you will hear from Sean himself. That's ahead. But first tonight, the full transcript of former FBI Director Jim Comey's interview with George Stephanopoulos has been released. It's a massive interview, clocking in at more than 5 hours, and it's deeply revealing. By now, you've probably heard a lot about what Comey has had to say about Donald Trump, and not very much of that was newsworthy, it turned out. The real value of this interview is what it says about James Comey. By the end, you realize that Comey never should have been FBI director. He's too partisan. Trump's main mistake was in not firing him on Inauguration Day. In his interview with ABC, Comey defends his prosecution of Martha Stewart, who you remember went to jail for lying to federal prosecutors. He then attacks General David Petraeus. According to Comey, Petraeus should have faced far more than a lone charge for mishandling classified information. He should have gone to prison for lying. In Comey's words, lying, quote, strikes at the heart of our rule of law in this country. Fair enough. The powerful should be held accountable for their misdeeds. But then Comey goes on to talk about the Mark Rich case. Do you remember that? On his way out of office, Bill Clinton sold a presidential pardon to a wanted felon who had fled the country. Comey is unambiguous about that case. Quote, I've never heard of another case where a fugitive from justice was pardoned. So Stephanopoulos then asks the obvious question. Quote, did you draw any conclusions about the Clintons, about Hillary Clinton from those experiences? Comey's response? Nope, none at all. Selling a presidential pardon to a fugitive says nothing whatsoever about the Clintons or their character. And by the way, Comey goes on to say that Hillary Clinton is awfully smart and hardworking. Loretta Lynch gets the same soft treatment. Comey concedes that as Attorney General, Lynch did in fact pressure him to describe the Hillary email investigation as a, quote, matter rather than what it actually was, a criminal investigation. Did Comey spot this obvious effort to politicize justice? Nope, not even close.
His first concern when she told him to refer to the Clinton email controversy as a matter rather than an investigation.
Did you think she was doing that to protect Hillary Clinton?
I didn't know. It worried me. It gave me an uncomfortable feeling because the Clinton campaign had been trying to come up with other words to describe it.
You know, I don't know, says Jim Comey. Comey doesn't know if Lynch was trying to protect Hillary Clinton. He doesn't want to draw any conclusions from that. He has no idea if the Attorney General was behaving politically when she told him to parrot the Clinton campaign's talking points. Comey goes on to say Loretta Lynch is a very smart and good person whom he respects very much. We remember that in the middle of all of this saga, President Obama publicly and repeatedly dismissed the entire Hillary Clinton email investigation as a nothing burger. Of course Hillary did nothing wrong, Obama said. Well, Comey concedes that Obama is a very smart lawyer, and he should have known better than to weigh in on an active investigation as president. The president shouldn't do that. Quote, do you think Obama was trying to color the case? Stephanopoulos asked. Once again, Comey replies, quote, I don't know. I don't think so. Well, there's a theme here. Again and again, partisan Democrats get every benefit of every doubt from Jim Comey. He can't rush to conclusions. That is, until he sees the white circles under Donald Trump's eyes. Then he's happy to speculate. Comey says repeatedly that lying is what bothers him most. He's devoted his life to fighting against dishonesty. That's why he wrote the book, he says. But Comey also says that former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper is the public servant he admires most. That's right, the very same James Clapper who lied to Congress, falsely claiming that intelligence agencies don't spy on Americans when he knew perfectly well that they do.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly.
Not wittingly. What you just saw is perjury. It's a federal crime. But unlike Martha Stewart, James Clapper got away with that. Jim Comey is happy that he did. The most revealing moments of the interview come when Comey describes the alleged Russian plot against our democracy. Comey claims repeatedly that Russia wanted Trump to beat Hillary Clinton in the election. But if it's that simple, why did Russian propagandists apparently attack Trump as well and stage protests against him? Comey doesn't address that. Instead, he acts as if we know for certain that Putin was working on Trump's behalf. But we absolutely do not know that for certain. In many cases, the facts contradict that conclusion. Comey is passing off speculation as fact. If Comey and the FBI really wanted to get to the bottom of a Russian plot against our democracy, why didn't the Bureau examine the DNC servers to make certain that Russia really hacked them? To this day, regardless of what you hear, we have never seen any evidence that the government of Russia directed the theft of data from those servers, or from John Podesta's Gmail account, from that matter. We just take that on faith. Everyone repeats it like it's true. But why should we believe that without actual proof? Because people like Jim Comey say so? Because our intel agencies never lie to us? Right. Comey's main piece of evidence that the president is a Russian stooge is that he never heard Trump criticize Vladimir Putin, even in private conversations. I don't know what's behind that, Comey says meaningfully. The implication is that Trump is unpatriotic, a traitor to America. So that's the new standard. Unless you denounce Putin vigorously and behind closed doors, our top law enforcement officials suspect you of disloyalty and criminal intent, and then all but accuse you of that on television. There's a name for this. It's called McCarthyism, and it's scarier than anything Trump has ever done with Russia. Finally, for a guy who says he's determined not to be political, Comey seems highly political. He says repeatedly in the interview with ABC that he's greatly influenced by his wife. He cites a number of occasions when she's weighed in on his job at DOJ, including during the investigation into torture at Abu Ghraib. Comey says again and again that he listens carefully to his wife. Well, given that, it's significant that Comey's wife turns out to be a bitter Hillary partisan. Watch.
On Saturday, January 21st, masses of demonstrators take to the streets, among them the family of James Comey.
My wife and girls marched in the Women's March the day after President Trump's inauguration. At least my 4 daughters, probably all 5 of my kids, wanted Hillary Clinton to be the first woman president. I know my amazing spouse did.
I wanted a woman president really badly, and I supported Hillary Clinton. A lot of my friends worked for her, and I was devastated when she lost.
Well, wait a second. We have news here. Jim Comey was the director of the FBI working for President Donald Trump. A bunch of his wife's friends worked on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Virtually his entire family marched against his boss on Trump's very first day of work. Comey gave ABC photographs of all of them carrying anti-Trump signs on the National Mall. We're not supposed to think that any of this had any effect on how Jim Comey approached his job in the Trump administration. But of course it did. Author and columnist Mark Steyn joins us tonight. So, Mark, Jim Comey tells us that he hates dishonesty, though Jim Clapper is his hero in the civil service. And then he says, when asked, well, why do you think Attorney General Loretta Lynch commanded you not to describe the criminal investigation into Hillary as a criminal investigation? He goes, I don't know. Just no idea. It didn't seem political to me. I mean, that's false.
Yeah, it is false. The circumstantial evidence that's staring you in the face when it comes to Democrat behavior, he professes to be blank about, but he'll happily, deliriously speculate on what Trump may have been doing with a bunch of prostitutes in Moscow. This is, basically fans of James Comey want it both ways, Tucker. I was listening to that bit about his wife and daughters marching in the Women's March the day after Trump's inauguration. On the one hand, we're told that James Comey is a straight shooter, a straight arrow, a Boy Scout. He's a nonpartisan civil servant. He's a straight shooting G-man. And on the other hand, his entire family is marching in this Women's March. I believe something like 4 million people marched across America. So out of the female population of the United States, that's about 2.5%. So it's not just that Mrs. Comey is a Hillary voter. It's that she's in the hardest hardcore of Hillary partisans. His number 2 at the FBI, Andrew McCabe, his wife is a Democrat candidate in Virginia. Again, it's not that, these are just people who pick candidate A or candidate B. They're in the hardest hardcore of partisans. And Comey and McCabe's tenure at the FBI was marked by a bizarre grotesque partisanship that is far closer to obstruction of justice. If you look at the way Lynch behaved, McCabe behaved, Comey behaved, Strzok behaved, Page behaved, is far closer to real obstruction of justice than Trump is supposedly being investigated for.
So if you were starting a new job and your wife said to you, look, I really don't like your boss, and you might say, I don't really like him either, or whatever. No, I really don't like him. I want to go march with a sign denouncing him on the National Mall on his first day of work. Yeah. Would you say, you know, maybe just for the sake of appearances, it is my boss after all, and my job requires me to have no political affiliation, maybe just kind of pull back on the public display of that a little bit? Or is that too much to ask in a marriage, do you think?
No, I think there's a difference to this. If you're the editor of Mother Jones, or even the editor of National Review, and the missus wants to march in the Women's March, I think that's fair enough. If they want to march in an anti-Tucker Carlson march or an anti-Mark Steyn march, I'm fine with that. But I think when you're a civil servant, particularly in law enforcement, then the Caesar's wife standard applies. And it's actually the only reason we're mired continuously in this ridiculous world of lawyers and legalisms and attorney-client privilege and lawsuits is because nobody understands. To come back to a word I use on this show a lot, Tucker, nobody understands what is seemly anymore. If you have to explain to the FBI director why his wife shouldn't be out shrieking in the streets at the Women's March with a bunch of big hats denouncing the president, if you have to explain to the FBI director why that's wrong, that guy shouldn't be FBI director.
Well, I think that, and I just want to be clear, I'm not attacking, and I don't think you are either, Comey's wife or her right to express her political views. That's great. I just don't think you can, with a straight face, say, I'm a totally nonpartisan FBI director when your whole family is marching against your boss on his first day of work. I mean, I just don't believe it. We're going to have more with Mark Steyn, because we can't get enough, and we don't think you can either. He's going to respond to a Chick-fil-A controversy, which is kind of interesting at the end of the show. We'll be right back. But first, Philippe Reines is a former advisor to Hillary Clinton who believes her campaign was hamstrung by none other than James Comey. Philippe, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Tucker.
So when you see Comey basically exposing himself as a Hillary Clinton fanboy, do you feel better? Do you think, actually, I miscalled this, he did love us, he didn't mean to hurt us?
Jim Comey was part of the Whitewater investigation that led to the Monica Lewinsky. Jim Comey investigated Bill Clinton in 2002. I think fanboy is probably a little bit.
And then he said the Mark Rich case, where President Clinton, whatever, you know, he's many good points. He did sell a presidential pardon to a fugitive felon hiding in Switzerland. And Comey's like, you know, it doesn't really tell us anything about the Clintons that he would do that. Really?
I don't think looking at his past, you can say anything other than he is a diehard Republican. He was picked by George Bush to be the FBI director. He was unanimously picked and confirmed by a majority in the Senate.
That's all true. That is all true. But when you watch this interview, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean,
his daughters, who are women, who voted and walked in the march.
Right, but I don't.
As did Jared Kushner's brother. I don't know that means that Jared is against his father-in-law.
And John Kasich is a diehard Republican, and so is Nikki Haley. But there are distinctions among Republicans, and this is a guy who has strong political beliefs, and they sort of emerged during the course of this 5-hour interview in an unmistakable way. He prefers Hillary to Trump. There's no way you can reach another conclusion.
I think if that was true, she'd be president right now.
Really?
I do.
Or maybe you could flip it around and say if it weren't true, she would have been indicted.
No, because the part of indicting going forward, I mean, there have been other investigations and there have been multiple looking at what she did. But what he did, what he came forward on July 5th and then later on October 28th, was so outside the norm of the protocols in place for the FBI director, so that we don't have another J. Edgar Hoover, who for 50 years bullied and blackmailed our presidents. So it's impossible to think that he in any way was helping Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think he wanted to, and I have said many times to you and
I think
others,
it's not clear what Jim Comey wanted.
Well, here's the most remarkable part of the interview to me, where he said to George Stephanopoulos, I never heard Donald Trump criticize Vladimir Putin in private, and held that up as evidence that somehow the president did something wrong. Are we now required in our private conversations to criticize Vladimir Putin, or else we'll fall under suspicion of law enforcement?
Well, I think you're seeing with Jim Comey what Jim Comey does best. He likes being in the spotlight. He likes being the victim and the hero. He's clearly venting about his time at the FBI and under President Trump and being fired. You can debate about whether private conversations, whether about Putin or not, were appropriate to be disclosing. But if you set aside, and I know this is a little convoluted, but there's Jim Comey, the man who had his actions and did things that really call his judgment into question. Then you have the Jim Comey who rationalizes why he does things. And
I think that's right. No, I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I just want to know what the standard is.
But I think it doesn't undermine everything he's done. And more importantly, he's been gone for a year.
That's true. But
he's no longer driving the train.
But he says this, and I thought actually Stephanopoulos did a pretty good job in the interview, but I was sort of struck that he didn't respond when Comey said, you know, worst of all, he never criticized Vladimir Putin. So watching everything that's happening around us, I wonder, is that still okay? Is it okay? Can you be a good American and not criticize Vladimir Putin in your private life?
It wasn't a private life. They were in the Oval Office.
No, but it's intelligent. It's just a conversation.
They were talking about Russia's meddling in the election. I know you and I have different opinions of that, but it would be the time for someone to say, I want to get to this Russia part. I think he was shorthanding Putin. And maybe, again, he shouldn't talk about private conversations. But his point is that Donald Trump wasn't taking much of an interest or concern with Russian attacks on our system.
Well,
I think that was his larger point.
I'm not either. I'm actually not concerned by that. I think it's like number 1,100 on our list of things to worry about. But I still think I'm a good American who cares about the country. And I guess I just don't want to live in a McCarthyite world where you're judged by the things that you don't say and your loyalty's impugned.
Well, some would argue that a McCarthyite world is asking your FBI director for loyalty.
Yeah, well, he didn't get it. So, Philippe, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I like the glasses, by the way. Well, Stormy Daniels took advantage of a media horde today in New York. We'll have that, plus Sean Hannity's response to the new revelations about attorney Michael Cohen. Stay tuned.
You didn't vote?
No.
Why not?
I'm the director of the FBI. I'm trying to be outside of politics, and that I shouldn't be choosing between the candidates.
Well, sure, Jim Comey ignored obvious misconduct by former Attorney General Loretta Lynch and his loathsome, dishonest friend James Clapper while deciding that Donald Trump was a Russian agent because he didn't hate Putin loudly enough. But don't worry, he's not really a political person, just a disinterested lawman. Dan Bongino is an NRA TV contributor, former Secret Service agent, and he joins us tonight. So is that the stand? I mean, I guess I'm fixated on this because I feel like American society is changing so fast. I'm trying to keep up, but is it allowed not to ritually denounce Vladimir Putin anymore?
No, apparently not. You probably should tweet about it all day, how much you can't stand Vladimir Putin, to vaccinate yourself. Yeah, you should. You must all day to vaccinate yourself against disingenuous attacks by kooky liberals in the media. Do you open up a social media account just to denounce Vladimir Putin if you're a conservative? Do yourself a favor. Tucker, this is the most absurd statement in that whole thing is him insinuating, Comey that is, that he's a nonpartisan actor. Let's be crystal clear on this. He admitted that some of his actions were possibly influenced by the poll numbers and that Hillary Clinton would be the next president. So let's just do a visual for the libs here, right? So you have blind Lady Justice with the blindfold who's peeking out at the poll numbers and saying, oh, Hillary Clinton may be the president. That is the very definition of politically motivated actions, but Comey doesn't seem to get that. And what's scary is he was the FBI director and was an investigator.
Do you think I mean, I'm trying to sort of take from his statements what it must be like at the highest levels of the FBI. Is it that he lives in a world where everybody agrees with him over at the FBI and at DOJ and doesn't know that his views are political when they are? Or is he just uniquely unself-aware? Or what's going on here?
I have a really solid source on this for a long time now. I was very upset with the way things went down at the FBI, Tucker. And the way he phrased it to me was there was kind of a cult of Comey there. That at times he could be a part-time director. Sometimes he would leave on Monday, not be there Monday, not be there Friday. He'd spend time in his other house somewhere else. But that there was a cult of Comey. And it was all around this self-image that he was this virtuous white knight who was outside the fray. But Tucker, someone who does that. Now, listen, I get it when political people make attacks, all right? I'm not excusing going after people on Twitter all the time. I do it too. But when you're the FBI director and you're on a nationally televised interview and you're mentioning mention it in your book, things like the president's tan lines and the size of his hands in your book. I mean, this is just disgraceful. If you did that in the Secret Service and got caught when I was there, got commenting on the president's looks or his personality or his marriage, you'd get the boot out of there so fast that door would hit you right in the butt on the way out.
Well, yeah, because you have a gun and you have permission to use it against American citizens, so the standard's higher for you. This guy put Martha Stewart in prison, and I'm glad he did. By the way, I slept easy when she was finally put away. But, I mean, yeah, abuse of power. Dan, thank you. Great to see you.
You too.
President Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, made an appearance in court today briefly. It was a significant moment, but the press focused on porn star Stormy Daniels, who made an appearance in the gallery. Watch.
Oh, be careful, guys. Be careful now. Do you have a message for the president?
Well, Daniels got the most attention today, but obviously she's a sideshow, just another act in our never-ending circus. The real news came at the hearing itself. Michael Cohen was forced to hand over a list of his clients to a judge. Among those on the list was our friend Sean Hannity in the hour after ours. Judge Kimba Wood ordered Hannity's identity revealed, even though Hannity had specifically requested that his name remain private, which is his right. A couple of hours ago, Sean issued the statement, quote, "Michael Cohen has never represented me in any matter. I never retained him, received an invoice, or paid legal fees. I have occasionally had brief discussions with him about legal questions about which I wanted his input and perspective," end quote. Sean plans to address this more broadly in just a bit on Fox. But keep in mind that Sean Hannity is a talk show host. He's not under investigation by anyone for anything. Who he hires as a lawyer and why is nobody's business. No judge has a right to violate his privacy or anybody else's. Those used to be the rules, but the rules have changed. The point of the Russia investigation, you may have figured out, is not to find collusion. There was no collusion. Everybody knows that. Everyone's always known that. The point is and was to hurt Trump and anyone close to Trump. And by the way, it's working. Now, maybe you hate Trump and you're happy about that. But what are the rest of us losing in this process? Attorney-client privilege no longer means anything. We learned that the other day. Neither does privacy or public reputation or fairness. If Cohen's other clients can be exposed by the left solely to embarrass them, what is the next step exactly? Could you punish a Trump ally by, I don't know, revealing his internet search history? What about someone's medical records? How about a private conversation with a priest or rabbi? Why not? All of that will happen, no question. And when it does, the left will cheer, because extremism in the pursuit of Trump is no vice, according to them. The question is, do you really want to live in a country like that? Who would? Well, American bombs will be falling on Syria, but that's not the country that actually matters. Are we lurching toward a major confrontation with Iran and Russia? It seems that way. We'll tell you more when we come back. America waded even deeper into Syria's civil war on Friday. We launched missiles at 3 targets following an alleged chemical attack by the government of Syria, the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Syria can't do anything about it, but the same cannot be said for some of the sponsors of that country. Russia and Iran both support the Assad regime, and they are more dangerous than Syria. Is America risking a major military confrontation that we're not prepared for? James Kirchick is a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution. He joins us tonight. Jamie, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So let me just ask you an overview question first that I've been thinking about all day, which is, I just want to question like the basic assumption. We think that the real story and the focus of American power ought to be in the Middle East, but there's all this stuff going on in our hemisphere. The drug war in Mexico, the collapse of Venezuela, the total disarray of El Salvador, a third of whose population now lives here, spreading Chinese influence in the Caribbean and Latin America. Why are we spending any time at all focused on the Middle East when we could focus on those things?
Well, being a superpower means you have to be able to balance multiple responsibilities. But I think the most important reason why what we did last weekend is that chemical weapons were used. And there is a consensus, there's international law among civilized people and nations that chemical weapons should not be used in warfare.
Right, I agree.
And they were used like they were used last year. And President Trump drew that line in the sand that you'll remember Barack Obama drew but didn't actually enforce. President Trump actually enforced it. And it was a surgical strike. We just struck at 3 facilities that were used in the production and the dissemination of chemical weapons, and we hit those. And if Assad tries to use them again, hopefully, I think we should hit them again.
But I wonder, I mean, my job is as a journalist to be loosely speaking, but I want to be skeptical. I feel like that's what I'm paid to do. And so I asked skeptical questions last week, like, how do we know this? Because I haven't seen anybody provide proof, and I've seen a lot of lying about it. We know this when we really don't. And I've been denounced repeatedly as a tool, today by the Washington Post, as a tool of the Putin regime. Shouldn't it make us nervous that we can't get a straight answer? How do we know this exactly?
It's very difficult to actually get at the scene because the Russians and the Syrians are preventing officials from the OPCW, the office that's supposed to monitor the use of chemical weapons. They won't let them there. So that leaves you to question, why are the Russians and the Syrians preventing observers from accessing these sites if they have nothing to hide? There's other evidence too.
Okay, but those are fair questions. And by the way, I'm open-minded on this as in all things.
Right.
I just think before you launch a strike as punishment for an action, you'd better ascertain with near certainty that the person you're striking was responsible for it and convince the population of that. We don't seem to feel that's necessary because, as you know, this is not really about chemical weapons. It's about making certain that Russia, and particularly Iran, don't gain a permanent foothold there, right?
Well, this attack was about chemical weapons. President Trump has made it pretty clear he doesn't want to spend much time or effort in Syria.
Really? Because Nikki Haley announced just today that our purpose there is to, quote, monitor Iran, leaving no timetable. There's no congressional authorization for that. And you and I both know, and maybe that's a good thing to do.
Right.
I don't know. But we're being lied to. It's not really about chemical weapons, so why don't we...
No, it isn't. It is about chemical... Look, as far as this administration goes, it's hard to tell what's going on because the president says one thing one day. He says we're going to get out of Syria. We want nothing to do there anymore. And then a week later, we're bombing Syria because of the use of chemical weapons.
Which makes us wonder, like, why is this not a pretext? Why is this not fake? That's the question I ask because it seems clearly fake. Shut up, Putin defender. That's the answer.
Who do you think faked the...
I literally have no idea, but twice in 1 year, the administration announces moves away from its policy of taking out Assad and withdrawing American troops, and within days each time, there's a chemical attack purportedly by the Assad government against its own population that is never proved. Color me skeptical. I'm not a conspiracy nut. Those are fair questions.
Yeah, I just don't think that we're capable of doing something like that. Frankly, it seems a little in the clouds.
Okay, but what is the... So we know that we haven't ascertained to an absolute certainty that Assad did this last attack, and yet we moved anyway, and my point, echoing Nikki Haley, was that it's really about Iran. So why lie to the public?
It can be about both things. It can be about enforcing the law that chemical weapons are not used, and that when they are used, the people who use them will be penalized. Let's not forget, it's not the Syrians. The Russians deployed a chemical nerve agent in the United Kingdom about 6 weeks ago.
I think there's
no, there isn't. There's no debate about that.
There's no debate.
No, there isn't debate about that.
Let me say, in my world, there's always debate. There's always debate. Nothing is...
Is there debate about the Holocaust? Is there debate about the moon landing?
Please don't. Come on, let's...
The moon landing?
This just happened, and I think it's fair to ask skeptical questions, and those people who don't are either stupid or they are willfully ignorant of the fact that life is complicated.
You should be skeptical, absolutely be skeptical, but there's a difference between being skeptical and entertaining conspiracy theories. I think it's quite clear that the Russians used a chemical nerve agent in the United Kingdom.
Then why aren't we attacking Russia?
Well, because they have nuclear weapons and could use them, so I don't think we're going to be...
Good, well, on that...
We're not going to be bombing Russia. But there are many things we can do short of bombing Russia to punish them for using a chemical nerve agent.
All right. Jamie Kirchick, I'd like to end, because I'm a fan of yours, I just want to end on a note of agreement. We should not be bombing Russia.
Yet.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get there. Thanks. Fired FBI Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe just got ripped apart in a scathing report by the Investigator General of the FBI. That story next. Plus, Sean Hannity awaits to respond to the news about Michael Cohen. We'll bring that to you coming up.
.com.
Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe has been treated like a martyr ever since he was fired by the Trump administration. Grateful CNN viewers have sent literally hundreds of thousands to his GoFundMe page. Pretty amusing. A new report, though, by the DOJ's Inspector General exposes just how much McCabe did to justify getting fired. It wasn't random, that's for sure. According to the report, McCabe lied to investigators at least 4 times, 3 of them under oath, trying to cover up his role in leaking information to the Wall Street Journal. The only purpose of those leaks, apparently, was to enhance McCabe's personal reputation at the expense of the agency for which he worked. Kimberly Strassel is on the Wall Street Journal editorial page board, and she joins us tonight. Kim, thanks for coming on. So put this in context for us. I mean, there's always so much cant around something like this. What's the truth about what Andy McCabe did?
So the reason this report is important is because amid all of the confusion and pointing of fingers and everything that has to do with the FBI, This provides meticulous, inarguable details, making the case that Andy McCabe engaged in an unauthorized disclosure to the press and then lied about it, and as you said, 3 times under oath, and therefore really explains why he was appropriately fired. And I think what also matters about this report is that it establishes the IG as a nonpartisan guy who is only interested in getting the facts out there. You cannot argue with this report, and that matters because this is just a piece of what's coming, a small piece of his broader investigation into the handling of the Clinton investigation, which is going to be coming out in May.
So I'm a little confused. Having just finished reading a 5-hour transcript of Jim Comey's interview with George Stephanopoulos, I know that the FBI takes lying under oath very seriously, and that's why they had to put public enemy number 1, Martha Stewart, behind bars in a federal prison because she lied to the FBI. When do we see the charges against Andy McCabe for lying under oath 3 times?
Yeah, the Department of Justice cannot duck this one. It is going to have to come out and explain to the public either why it's choosing, either it's going to say that it's going to prosecute Andy McCabe for lying to the FBI, or explain why it has a double standard. One standard for average Americans, one standard for everybody else. And then perhaps after it explains that double standard, it can decide that it's going to start holding average Americans to the same standard it holds its own agents and senior leadership.
Where you get to carry a gun with a high-capacity mag wherever you want, arrest people, and lie with impunity? That'd be a totally different country if we lived by the FBI standards, wouldn't it?
Yeah, no, and this is not the first time that this has happened. There's long been questions at the FBI when other people have been found to be cavalier with the truth. They never seem to have the same zeal that they do. Look, there's a half a dozen former members or people associated with the Trump campaign that are going to jail or have been indicted or prosecution facing charges from Bob Mueller for the exact same thing, supposedly lying to the feds.
Oh, I've noticed. That's the main charge, actually. What an amazing story. Kim Strassel, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, New York is a famously diverse city, but according to The New Yorker, which is the in-house newsletter of New York, Chick-fil-A is not welcome because its owners are, brace yourself, Christians. Mark Stein rejoins us for that. Plus, Sean Hannity responds to the news about his relationship with attorney Michael Cohen. We'll be right back. Well, we'll forgive you if you've been a little distracted these past few weeks by, I don't know, the war in Syria, the opioid crisis, the rise of China, your own unsustainable credit card debt. You may not be fretting about the real issues plaguing the world, but fear not, CNN has that covered. A story on CNN's website covers the world's most important topic, obviously you know what it is, transgender migrants seeking asylum in America. In a glowing profile, CNN profiles Nicole Contreras, who's a Honduran biological male, who wants to come to this country to claim asylum so that he can more easily identify as a woman. Contreras is part of that caravan headed for the United States. When he arrives, he will doubtless receive thousands in benefits, legal assistance, probably medical care. Will that make this a better country? I don't know. CNN thinks so. So celebrate it. Meanwhile, in New York, they love Chick-fil-A in New York. One Manhattan location says it sells a chicken sandwich every 6 seconds of the day. The New Yorker magazine, by contrast, does not love Chick-fil-A. A new piece in the New Yorker calls the restaurant, quote, creepy. Why? Quote, the brand's arrival here feels like an infiltration, in no small part because of its pervasive Christian traditionalism, end quote. Think about this. In the largest city in the country, a country that has been majority Christian for its entire history as a country, there's now a restaurant that is owned by Christians, and that is offensive, says the New Yorker magazine. It's creepy. In fact, it's an infiltration. Meanwhile, every other corner in Midtown has a halal cart manned by a guy who grew up 6,000 miles from here and barely speaks English. But that's not an infiltration. It's diversity, and if you don't celebrate it, you must be punished. Ha! Has any country, taking 3 steps back, ever had a less impressive intellectual class than ours currently does? Mark Stein has studied the history of intellectual classes through history, and he joins us tonight with a verdict on that.
Well, I have studied the New Yorker. I mean, I haven't read it in a long while, but I can safely say this appallingly written piece would never have run under Harold Ross or even Tina Brown in the good old days. This sentence I love. This guy is upset because, quote, the restaurant's corporate purpose still begins with the words to glorify God. It still begins with the words to glorify God because God is so 2013. Anthony Kennedy ruled that God is outmoded, and now you cannot, it's offensive to be served a chicken sandwich made by a guy who believes in the same definition of marriage as Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton did 10 years ago. So this guy is saying we can't tolerate Christian traditionalists serving us their homophobic chicken sandwiches. We already know a so-called pervasive Christian traditionalist can't be a Hollywood producer, he can't be a New Yorker columnist, he can't be a Broadway choreographer, and now he can't even make you a lousy homophobic chicken sandwich.
But
so all the Christian traditionalists should be out of work, sleeping under a bridge, sleeping under the Brooklyn Bridge.
What's so weird, though, is that the halal guy, and some of them were super nice and I like their food, not attacking the halal guys, but if you pressed on their attitudes on these same issues, they're way more medieval than the Chick-fil-A guys, and yet the New Yorker loves them. Why is that?
Oh, no. I like the halal food. I'm not on board with the throwing the gays off buildings or the main doctrinal dispute. I had this from Imam Karadawi. His main doctrinal dispute is whether you should throw gays off tall buildings or burn them alive. That would be a fascinating thing for this big butch New Yorker guy to take against. You mentioned Venezuela. Citgo stations are all over New York, and the president of the company is Hugo Chavez's cousin. And in Venezuela right now, they're actually eating domestic animals. They're not eating homophobic chicken, they're eating their own dogs and cats because of what they've done to them.
We're lacking perspective, I would say, on some of these issues, but I appreciate you bringing it, as you always do. Mark Stein, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Do you remember Governor Rod Blagojevich of Illinois? He was a governor, then a Celebrity Apprentice contestant, and now he's behind bars. His last hope for getting out of jail early is the president. The developments in that case, which are interesting, just ahead. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has rejected the final appeal from imprisoned former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, virtually guaranteeing he'll remain in prison for the next 6 years. He's already been there for quite a while. Fox's Matt Finn has more on that story. Hey, Matt.
Tucker, the U.S. Supreme Court turned down former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich's appeal, and now he's basically guaranteed to be behind bars until 2024 unless the president pardons him, and the two happen to know each other. Blagojevich appeared on the president's former reality show, The Apprentice. Back in 2012, the former governor was found guilty on several corruption charges, mostly related to trying to potentially sell then-Senator Barack Obama's Senate seat that was left vacant when Obama was elected president, and it was up to Blagojevich to fill his seat. Blagojevich was taped by the FBI saying in part that Obama's vacant seat was a golden thing he wasn't going to give up for nothing. The disgraced governor insists he never received a bribe or kickback. Blagojevich has been in a federal prison since 2012 and has filed a series of appeals which have all been denied, leading up to today when it was turned down once again in the highest court. Now, before Blagojevich was in prison, he appeared on multiple late-night talk shows and reality TV shows. He eventually became a household name nationwide, known for his flamboyance and fall from grace. Tucker.
Matt Finn, thanks a lot for that. Joining us now is Patricia Blagojevich. She's the wife of the former governor. Ms. Blagojevich, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was never a supporter of your husband's, and I'm sure I'll offend some viewers, but I have to say I thought he got an awful long time in prison. I don't know all the details of it, but I'd be interested in knowing if you could speak to the president. What would you say? What would be your pitch to pardoning your husband?
Well, you know, we were so disappointed today that the Supreme Court did not decide to take up our case and end this very dangerous conflict that we have in the law right now, and provide clarity that we had hoped for. The clarity that both anyone who runs for political office and anyone who donates to those political candidates really needs. This this is so dangerous because it allows the FBI and power-hungry, overzealous prosecutors like Patrick Fitzgerald, who prosecuted both my husband and Scooter Libby, to go after anyone that they don't like just because that person might be unpopular or controversial. It's, you know, my husband is probably the only person in the entire history of the United States who is serving any kind of sentence for simply asking for campaign contributions.
How many years did he get?
It's a 14-year sentence, and he never took a bribe, never took a kickback, never made any promises to contributors for any official acts. We never took gifts, trips, cars, watches, any of the other things that some of these other governors have been convicted of, and yet he serves a sentence that's twice as long as anyone else.
Do you see him a lot?
We go out there, you know, he's been out there 6 years. He's in Colorado and we live in Chicago. And the first couple of years we're out there quite a bit. Now we go out there about 4 times a year, but we still talk on the phone every single day. But my daughters are growing up. You know, my older daughter is a senior in college. She's graduating in 2 months. My younger one's in high school. So, you know, the ability to just pull them out of school to go see their dad it gets harder and harder.
I always feel, no matter what they've done for men in prison, and he's certainly lucky to have you, whatever you think of what your husband did as governor. He's lucky he's married to you. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Good luck.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, that's about it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 8 o'clock to the show that's the sworn enemy of lying. There's more of it than ever. Pomposity, it's everywhere. Smugness, and groupthink. We're trying. Good night from Washington. No one else is talking about Sean Hannity today, but he's here anyway, and we're really glad to see him. Hey,
Is there any news? Anything happening? All right, thanks, Tucker. Great show as always. Welcome to Hannity. Tonight, I got to give a special